Send the following message and the boats will stop. If you come to the UK illegally, you won't be met with luxury accommodation. What will the British government do to you? 2 words: detain, deport.
Rupert Lowe dropped a bombshell on Starmer and his cronies, and now Labour's absolutely terrified.
I can assure you, my recent contributions in Westminster have been in front of far less welcoming crowds. I hope to finally finish a speech without being warned over my tone by a belly-aching socialist.
Labour got humiliated and destroyed so badly that they're trying to silence Rupert Lowe now.
I mean, we're out of sorts. I'm doing more work on this grooming gangs situation. I think it is a national scandal. It's, as I said, it's a stain on our history. Yeah. And, you know, I think we must have a national inquiry with statutory powers. I'm speaking to more and more whistleblowers. I've got one coming down to see me on my farm this morning.
Starmer and the Labour Party's days are numbered as Rupert Lowe is coming for them.
Our message to the world has to be this: if you come here illegally, you will be deported. Not housed in luxury accommodation, fed and cared for at the taxpayer's expense, deported. Not allowed to roam the streets entirely unchecked, with no limits, deported. Not free to apply for asylum under whatever lie the Home Office is buying this week, deported. Removing those with no right to be here is not cruel, it's not heartless, it's necessary.
The immigration crisis has spiralled out of control, and Labour's idiotic and soft policies are to blame.
These men are not desperate asylum seekers, they are not irregular migrants, they are illegal migrants, and they should be treated as such. Spreading them across the country into unsuspecting communities is pure insanity. Ask yourselves honestly, if a hotel at the bottom of your road was suddenly filled overnight with young foreign males who have entered the country almost entirely unchecked, would you be happy for your teenage daughter to go out after dark?
There's no telling what kind of people Starmer and his gang are letting into the nation, and Rupert Lowe is fuming.
I will give way.
Thank the honourable member for giving way. Does he agree with me that women across the country face very difficult situations working home at night, and often the tone of debate is incredibly important to maintain our safety in all situations?
I thank the honourable member for the question. I don't think the tone of the debate is in any way relevant to this. What's relevant to this is what the government does to protect the interests of the British people.
Labour's supporters tried all they could to sideline Rupert Lowe, but he doubled down.
The answer is no. If you disagree, you're even more deluded than the Home Office. When I try to explore the actual cost of these hotels and the surrounding healthcare, travel, translation, recreational activities and more, I'm denied vast swathes of information by the Home Office. It's a cover-up. They say the Home Office doesn't pay for X or Y. That's because it's all subcontracted out on billion-pound contracts spread over 10 years. The list of further subcontractors on these contracts are fully redacted.
While Starmer's cronies are busy giving luxury treatment to these immigrants, the safety of Britain is at stake.
Let me be abundantly clear. The full cost of these hotels is being concealed from the British public. I am doing everything in my power to uncover the truth. Locals aren't even informed about what's happened in their town. I asked the Home Office to develop a consultation process with residents before a hotel is hijacked. They refused and reminded me of their obligation to care for illegal migrants.
There is a huge information gap that Labour has created on purpose to keep us in the dark and hide their sinister agenda.
Hotels are being filled with these young men in close proximity to girls' schools. Does anyone here find that acceptable? I've pushed the government to undertake a review into the impact on British women and girls of crime emanating from these hotels. Again, they refused. Who is the Home Office actually serving? Sadly, I have little doubt that there is far more crime being committed by illegal migrants than we're being told. I've raised this time and again with the government. Nobody seems to care.
Labour's running around like cowards because they know that they will be shredded by the public if the truth comes out.
There are roughly 30,000 illegal migrants in hotels around the country. As we know, the vast majority are young males, many from cultures that do not respect women. This is not racist, far right, or whatever else. It's a reality, one we must start to deal with. Secure detention is required, not open hotels.
There's no background checks whatsoever, and Starmer sees no problem in letting them into our country.
If we get serious on deportations, they won't be necessary for long. Send the following message and the boats will stop. If you come to the UK illegally, you won't be met with luxury accommodation. What will the British government do to you? 2 words: detain, deport. This is the only way.
The immigration crisis isn't hard to solve. Labour's simply refusing to do anything about it. They're too soft, too weak, and completely incompetent to take the tough decisions that are needed. On top of that, the socialist agenda that Starmer keeps shoving down our throats is behind this entire mess. The Labour Party is so convinced that their delusional dream of multiculturalism works that they're actively ruining Britain in the process. It's abundantly clear that Starmer and his cronies are too tone deaf to listen to any of us.
I can assure you, my recent contributions in Westminster have been in front of far less welcoming crowds. I hope to finally finish a speech without being warned over my tone by a belly-aching socialist. Let's see.
Pretty much every single time that Rupert Lowe has delivered a speech in the Parliament, it has led to Labour being completely humiliated. And what happens when the incompetent Labour Party is met with logic and reason? They try to run away or shut down all debate around the matter. And that's exactly what they've done with Rupert Lowe. Starmer and his gang throw tantrums over the tone of his speeches rather than address the very valid point that he raises.
But friends, be in no doubt that our country is in the most precarious position I can remember. And what is the root cause? Uncontrolled mass immigration. Immigration, immigration, immigration. Legal and illegal.
Starmer has downplayed the severity of this issue for far too long. Make no mistake, our country is struggling on every possible level, and most of us aren't even aware of that fact. The reason being that this Labour government keeps on gaslighting and manipulating the public into believing that things will work out in the end. Illegal immigration has completely clobbered this country from all sides, and we're starting to see some serious consequences. And what has Starmer done so far? Absolutely nothing but empty promises and useless policies that don't achieve anything.
If objecting to these men, often from alien cultures that hold no respect for women, being housed in luxury accommodation at taxpayers' expense makes me a racist, then so be it. If believing that immigration should be strictly controlled and designed to solely benefit the British people makes me a bigot, then so be it.
Labour's entire narrative centres around this lie that if you disagree with them, then you're a morally bad person. They use this to guilt trip and silence everyone who opposes them, and that's simply because they're too dumb to come up with an actual argument. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that uncontrolled immigration is unraveling our society, economy, and institutions at rates we've never seen before. There's an increasing connection between these immigrants and surging crime rates, and unless Labour comes up with another explanation, it seems like this country is growing unsafe by the day.
For too long, our language has been policed and censored. Decent men and women have been forced into silence. I say no more. What has that sinister attitude led to? The mass rape of young working-class white girls by mainly Pakistani men on an industrial scale.
The grooming gang scandal that has been going around the entire nation recently is, according to Rupert Lowe, a major consequence of this uncontrolled immigration. His argument is simple. The very fact that we let people from vastly different cultures in without doing proper checks means that they're far more likely to clash with our own British values. On top of that, the crime stats do show that these immigrants are responsible for disproportionate levels of crime as compared to their population.
I do not say this lightly, but it makes me ashamed to be British. We failed those girls, and heads must roll. I want deportations, not just for the rapists, but also the family members who are aware of their heinous crimes. If that results in tens of thousands of deportations, then that is what must happen. I want prosecutions for anyone in any position of authority who knew about these savages and did nothing, or even worse, concealed their crimes.
Starmer and his gangs have completely destroyed any semblance of justice in this nation, and now Rupert Lowe is destroying Labour for their massive failures. A huge number of Brits genuinely believe that these scandals were part of a cover-up by the government and relevant officials because they didn't want to sound racist. Let that sink in. These politicians chose to deny justice to young British girls and would rather defend criminals instead.
I want justice for anybody involved in these rape gangs. Should feel the full force of the law. Race and religion must protect no one. As a country, how did we let this happen to those poor young girls? Most horrifyingly, it's still happening today. Right now as I speak to you tonight. Never forget that. Many of these monsters have even been released back into the same communities where the children they raped reside.
The demands that Rupert Lowe is making are literally what the rest of the nation wants as well. It's not racist or bigoted to demand justice, and if anything, we have the right to do so. Rupert Lowe doesn't just stop there, he's threatening to take things to the next level if Starmer does get his act right soon. The British public will not accept this cover-up and are demanding a proper investigation. Those who were involved, regardless of who they are, should be arrested, tried, and punished appropriately. In fact, Rupert Lowe is ready to debate for the harshest punishment you can imagine.
It's not often I have to correct you. I didn't actually call for the death penalty. I called for a debate on whether or not the death penalty should be restored in exceptional circumstances like this one.
Yeah.
So I think it is time for a national debate on this. This is an example of the malaise that Britain's currently suffering. And this is also a failure of multi-government departments and quangos.
There's ongoing debate already on the use of death penalty in such cases. What sparked this argument was specifically when the details of the Southport attack came out to the public. Those unfortunate deaths were so horrific that many people started calling for the death penalty, and even Rupert Lowe is ready to debate that idea. The bigger problem is this government's inability and unwillingness to punish such heinous crimes. It's making people wonder if Starmer and his gangs even cares about the British public in the slightest or not.
Also, a week before this event, he called him and pulled him out of a taxi because he believed he was on his way to a school to massacre a load of school children. What the hell was he thinking? Why did he not call the police at that point?
Yeah, so look, there's in my view, I said it in Parliament, there's blood on the hands of some of these agencies, and you and I know they run round in ever-decreasing circles and blame each other. And none of them are held to account, which is disgraceful.
The Southport incident was yet another example of the sheer incompetence of our government and institutions. Throughout the whole issue, many of them should have stepped in and called the police, but none of them were ready to take the action. They let the killer run free while knowing all about his mental state, and you could argue that they ended up enabling these horrible attacks. What does that tell you about the corruption and tolerance that have ruined this nation's institutions?
We've got to go back to the grooming gangs, which, as you know, my team and I kicked this off again when we read the transcripts of some of those court cases. It's rather like, the human body, when it's not functioning properly, you get a sore tongue. And I think the grooming gangs are the sore tongue of Britain, showing us that as a country we're out of sorts.
The Southport attack and the grooming gang scandal are just two recent prominent cases that have come to light. Who knows about the extent of this problem? There's no telling how deep this rot might run because Labour is being dishonest and nobody has bothered to investigate in full detail. It just goes to show that there's a deeper, bigger issue at the heart of it all, and all fingers seem to be pointing towards the immigration crisis.
They undermined the British Constitution. They're the ones who, as you know, Cherie Blair is a human rights lawyer. Keir Starmer's fingerprints are all over this. He was a human rights lawyer in 2005. These people systematically undermined our Constitution, and I think in an attempt to cuddle up to Europe and create Britain as another sort of part of the European Union, they undermined our sovereignty by creating a fertile environment for mass legal and illegal immigration.
Labour has historically been soft on crime, and now Sir Softy is no different. Keir Starmer is heavily biased towards the whole globalist agenda and the European Union. That should come as no surprise to anyone. On top of all that, we've seen him take desperate measures to chain us back to the European Union in a series of disastrous policy moves. Is it then any wonder that this government is hopelessly stupid when it comes to immigration policy? They're still living in the fantasy land of multiculturalism.
I'm doing more work on this grooming gangs situation. I think it is a national scandal. It's, as I said, it's a stain on our history.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we must have a national inquiry with statutory powers. I'm speaking to more and more whistleblowers. I've got one coming down to see me on my farm this morning. And if the government doesn't instigate this national inquiry that I think is now well overdue, it's my intention to play a part in ensuring we get a full documentary on this issue.
What does it tell you about the priorities of our government when Rupert Lowe is the one pushing for justice instead of them? If anything, Labour is representing the minority opinion in this country, and that's why they are doing so horribly in the polls. The people demand action, and Rupert Lowe is threatening some serious consequences for Starmer and his cronies. Given the number of scandals they've already been involved in, if the truth comes out about the immigration crisis, it might be completely over for Labour.
So there's lots of things we need to learn from this, and the country needs to cleanse itself of this stain on our history, and it can't do it unless it's fully exercised and the public actually understands what's happened. So I'm not going to let this drop. I think this is symptomatic of a hugely concerning malaise which Britain's currently going through.
Any sensible government would try to right the wrongs of the past, but Labour is busy trying to cover up the truth, which is exactly why Rupert Lowe is destroying and humiliating them in Parliament for the entire nation to watch. Remember all those promises Starmer made to smash the gangs and bring immigration under control. That turned out to be nothing more than a disgusting and shameless lie, because their actions are turning out to be the exact opposite.
Well, I think it's awful. As I imagine you know, I think it's awful. The Labour Party seems to me don't really believe in the importance or privilege of British citizenry. They see, I think, people from across the globe as being equal in their rights to British citizens, even though it is the British citizen to whom the Labour Party, the elected governing party, owes their obligation.
No matter how you look at it, at the end of the day, Starmer and the Labour Party simply don't value Britain. It's a shameful and disgraceful betrayal to the nation that they're prioritising migrants over us at every step of the way. Starmer's handing out British citizenships like it's candy, and doing so to the people who have shown time and time again that they are the least deserving of it. Make no mistake, it's not because of their race or place of origin, it's due to their unwillingness to integrate and respect British values.
Actually, I think, Peter, we need to be going completely in the other direction. We should recognise, as I'm sure the British people do, that we've lost control of our borders. Not just illegal migration, but also legal migration. We've lost control. We've got far too many people coming to this country.
Starmer is so tone-deaf and delusional that he is in total denial of reality. Anyone with a shred of common sense can see that the situation has gotten way out of control and we've lost all control of our borders. Just look at the soaring number of small boats that are coming to our shores every single day. Instead of reducing them or turning them back, Starmer welcomes them in open arms and offers them huge benefits at our expense. That's right, it's your taxpayer money that pays for the luxury treatment offered to the migrants.
We've got to settle the position. We mustn't be giving away our citizenship. It's a privilege to be a British citizen, and in order to protect that privilege and to protect the people of this country, we need to have a moratorium right now until we've got a grip of the problem that we've created.
Perhaps the most pathetic thing out of it all is that this problem is incredibly easy to solve. The only reason Labour keeps delaying it with excuses is because they simply don't want to. Donald Trump managed to send a strong message on immigration within days of taking office, and that just proves how incompetent Starmer is. All they need to do is stop handing out British citizenships, lock down our border, and deport everyone who comes illegally. It shouldn't be that hard to do.
1,300 illegal migrants caught. These are only the ones who've been caught pretending to be minors after the cases were flagged with officials. I mean, there are obvious incentives to pretend to be younger than you are, and it's sometimes difficult to tell exactly how old someone is. And there are obvious, very, very worrying things that can happen if someone is designated to be 16 when actually they're 19 or 20.
The more you look into the details, the worse the situation gets. It's absolutely appalling that the reality of this matter is much more horrible than it looks on the surface. Just think for a moment, If young adults are pretending to be minors just to stay in this country, what happens when they're put in schools and facilities with actual minors? Is that not a very clear safety risk that Starmer doesn't seem to care about?
You know, we've lost control of our borders. We've got to recognize that. We won't know how to control our borders, how to make sure people don't lie about their age, how to make sure people genuinely have a right to be here before, without actually recognizing first that we've lost control.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. Our government has lost control.
To fix a problem, we must first accept that it is a problem. Unless Starmer and his stupid gang of misfits let go of their denial and delusion, we won't be seeing any real progress on this issue. Of course, time is running out because the immigration rates are through the roof already, and there's no end in sight to how high they can go. On the other hand, our institutions like healthcare and schooling are burdened before belief, and it's not long before everything comes crumbling down.
Coming to this country, we don't need cheap, unskilled labor or cheap, even semi-skilled labor coming to this country undermining wages for British workers. I'm sure that's a fundamental part of why we've got 7.2 million people in this country surviving now on universal credit. That figure a year ago was 6 million. Before the pandemic, that figure was 3 million. It's absolutely skyrocketed. And that skyrocketing in people claiming universal credit has happened at exactly the same rate at which our immigration has skyrocketed.
Labour's excuse of needing immigration isn't working anymore, either. Not when a huge number of British citizens are already unemployed. What's worse is that the majority of the immigrants don't actually contribute anything at all to the economy. They reap the benefits of our welfare system, paid by our taxpayer money, while the rest of us live in utter misery under this shambolic government. So, when Rupert Lowe destroys Labour, he's absolutely right to do so. No wonder so many people support him. If anything, you can join them in showing support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.